In 1874, a 19-year-old girl fled her wedding to a violent man she'd never love, riding straight into Comanche territory, where death seemed certain. What she found instead was a warrior so powerful, so unexpected, that he would rewrite everything she thought she knew about strength, love, and what it means to truly live. Before we dive into the story, click the like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more incredible stories tomorrow. Leave a comment telling us where you're watching from and what time it is there right now. Now let's continue with the story. Elara Whitfield's hands shook as she tightened the saddle on her father's fastest mare. Dawn hadn't broken yet over the San Angelo ranch, but in 3 hours, she was supposed to walk down a makeshift aisle towards Cyrus Dalton, a cattle baron with cold eyes and a reputation for cruelty. She was 19. He was 42. Her father called it a business arrangement. Elara called it a death sentence. She'd packed light. Her mother's silver locket, a canteen, dried meat wrapped in cloth. The mare shifted beneath her weight as Elara swung into the saddle, her wedding dress still hanging untouched in her bedroom. Let them find it there. Let her father explain to Dalton why his bought bride had vanished. She rode east as the sun bled across the horizon, pushing the mare hard across open prairie. By midday, the ranch had disappeared behind her. By afternoon, she'd crossed into territory she didn't recognize. The landscape changed, grew wilder, dotted with mesquite and rocky outcrops. She should have felt afraid. Instead, she felt free. But freedom had a price. As twilight descended, Elara realized she was lost. The landmarks she'd been following had become confusing shadows. The mare stumbled near a narrow creek, spooked by something Elara couldn't see. The horse reared, and Elara hit the ground hard, her ankle twisting beneath her with a sickening crack. Pain exploded up her leg. The mare bolted into the darkness, leaving her alone with nothing but the sound of water and her own ragged breathing. She tried to stand. Her ankle buckled. She collapsed against a flat rock, biting back a scream. This was it then. She'd escaped one death only to find another. At least this one was her choice. Then she heard it. The soft crush of footsteps on dry grass. Something moving through the shadows with purpose. Elara's heart hammered against her ribs. She fumbled for the small knife in her boot, fingers clumsy with pain and panic. A figure emerged from the darkness, tall, broad-shouldered, moving with the silence of smoke. And when the moonlight caught his face, Elara forgot how to breathe. He was Comanche. Elara knew it instantly from the way he dressed, the way he moved like he owned the earth beneath his feet. He stood there, studying her with eyes so dark they seemed black in the moonlight, and she waited for the violence she'd been taught to expect from his people. It didn't come. Instead, he crouched down slowly, hands visible, like he was approaching a wounded animal. He was massive up close, battle scars cutting across his bronze skin, his long hair falling past his shoulders. Everything about him screamed danger. Everything except his eyes. They held something Elara couldn't name. Curiosity, maybe, or recognition. "You hurt." His English was broken, but clear. His voice was deeper than thunder rolling across the plains. Elara's grip tightened on her knife. "Stay back." He glanced at the blade, then at her swollen ankle, then back to her face. Something that might have been amusement flickered across his features. He said something in his own language, musical and harsh at the same time, then switched back to English. "I know hurt you. You hurt already. I don't need your help. Yes, you do." He moved closer despite her raised knife. "I am Dakota. You are far from white people land, Very far. I know where I am. No, he shook his head. You lost. I watch you since sun high. You ride in circles. Heat flushed Alara's cheeks. He'd been tracking her. Watching her fumble through terrain he knew like his own heartbeat. She must have looked like a child playing at adventure. Dakota gestured to her ankle. I fix, or you die here. Wolves come soon. As if summoned by his words, a howl echoed somewhere in the distance. Alara's stomach dropped. She looked at this warrior who could have killed her a dozen times already but hadn't, who spoke to her like she was a person, not property, who was offering help instead of violence. She lowered the knife. Dakota moved with surprising gentleness for someone so large. His hands were rough and warm as he examined her ankle, his touch careful. He pressed against the bone, and she gasped. He nodded to himself, then began unwrapping something from his belt. Leather strips and small wooden splints. Why are you helping me? Alara asked through gritted teeth as he worked. Dakota was quiet for a long moment, binding her ankle with practiced efficiency. When he finally spoke, his eyes met hers with an intensity that made her forget the pain. You run from something. I see it in your face. Same look I have. He finished the wrapping and sat back. Maybe we both run from ghosts. Before Alara could respond, he stood and held out his hand, not demanding, offering, like she had a choice in what happened next. And somehow, that simple gesture meant everything. Dakota lifted her like she weighed nothing, cradling her against his chest as he moved through the darkness. Alara should have been terrified. Instead, she felt strangely safe, listening to his steady heartbeat as he carried her across rough terrain she couldn't see. They walked for what felt like hours before the landscape opened into a hidden canyon, firelight flickering between scattered shelters. The camp went silent when they appeared. A dozen pairs of eyes turned toward them, suspicious and sharp. Women stopped their work. Men gasped for weapons. A small child ducked behind her mother's skirts. An older woman approached, her face weathered, but her eyes keen. She spoke rapidly in Comanche, gesturing at Alara with clear displeasure. Dakota answered in the same language, his tone firm. The debate continued until the woman threw up her hands and muttered something that sounded like resignation. Nadua say you bring trouble, Dakota explained, lowering Alara onto a buffalo hide near one of the fires. I tell her trouble already here. One more not matter. Nadua knelt beside them, studying Alara with uncomfortable intensity. Then she spoke in perfect English. You have white skin, but you ran from white people. Why? The question was so direct, it caught Alara off guard. They wanted to cage me. Something shifted in Nadua's expression. I was white once, taken when I was 9, given choice to return when I was grown. She gestured around the camp. I stayed. This is freedom. Your people don't understand freedom. Only ownership. Dakota unpacked herbs and clean cloth while Nadua prepared a poultice. They worked together in practiced rhythm, clearly having done this many times before. As they rebandaged her ankle properly, Alara watched the camp around her. These weren't the savages she'd been taught to fear. They were families, people living, laughing, surviving together. How many are you? Alara asked. 23, Nadua said quietly. Last free Comanche in this territory. The rest are on reservations, dying slow. We choose to die free instead. Dakota's hand stilled on the bandage. His jaw clenched. Nadua touched his shoulder and said something soft in their language. When he looked up, his eyes held a grief so profound it made Alara's chest ache. Dakota lost his wife and daughter 2 winters ago, Nadua explained. Cavalry came at dawn. He was hunting. Came back to find them gone. He hasn't been the same since. Barely speaks anymore. Yet he'd spoken to Alara, carried her here, taken care of her ankle with gentle hands that had clearly known terrible violence. Alara looked at this warrior who understood loss and running and felt something shift inside her chest. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Dakota met her eyes. For the first time since she'd met him, he almost smiled. "You say sorry like you mean it. White people usually don't." "I'm not like most white people." "No," he agreed softly. "You not." 5 days passed before Alara could put weight on her ankle. 5 days of watching Dakota from across the fire, learning the rhythm of camp life, picking up Comanche words from the children who'd grown curious about her. She should have been planning her escape, figuring out where to go next. Instead, she found herself wanting to stay. On the 6th morning, Dakota appeared at her shelter with 2 pairs of moccasins. "Your boots too loud. You sound like buffalo." He dropped them beside her. "Today you learn to walk quiet." Alara slipped them on. They fit perfectly. Soft leather, molding to her feet. "Did you make these?" "Nadua make. I just tell her your foot size." He turned and started walking. "Come." She followed him out of camp and into the surrounding hills. Her ankle protested, but held. Dakota moved like a shadow, absolutely silent, while Alara crashed through brush like a drunken steer. Every few minutes he'd stop, shake his head, and show her again. How to place her feet, how to shift her weight, how to become part of the landscape instead of fighting it. "You try too hard," he said after her 20th failed attempt. "White people always try too hard. You don't fight the earth. You listen to it." "That doesn't make sense." "Close eyes." Alara obeyed. Immediately, the world sharpened. She heard wind moving through grass, a bird calling from somewhere west, her own breathing too loud and uneven. "Feel the ground before you step." Dakota's voice was close to her ear. "Earth tells you where to walk." She tried again, eyes closed, letting her feet learn what her eyes couldn't teach them. This time when she moved, something clicked. She felt the path instead of seeing it. "Better," Dakota said, and she heard the smile in his voice. They spent hours in those hills. He taught her to read tracks, to identify plants, to find water by watching where birds flew at dusk. He was patient in a way she hadn't expected, explaining things 2 or 3 times without frustration. And slowly, Alara began teaching him too. More English words, how to string together longer sentences. Their conversations grew from broken fragments into something real. "Why you run from wedding?" he asked one afternoon as they rested near a stream. Alara trailed her fingers through the water. "The man they chose for me. He hurt his first wife. Everyone knew it. My father didn't care. He wanted the land the marriage would bring." Dakota was quiet for a long time. Then, "Your father is fool. You worth more than land." Something warm bloomed in Alara's chest. Back home, she'd been property, a transaction. But when Dakota looked at her, she felt seen. Not as a daughter or a bride or something to be used, just as herself. And that changed everything. The storm hit without warning on Alara's 3rd week in camp. One moment the sky was clear, the next it was black with rage. Rain hammered down in sheets as everyone scrambled for shelter. Dakota grabbed Alara's hand and pulled her toward a small overhang in the canyon wall, barely big enough for 2 people. They pressed inside just as lightning split the sky. Thunder followed so loud it rattled Alara's bones. She'd always loved storms back home, but this was different. This was the sky declaring war. "You shake," Dakota observed in the darkness. "I'm not scared of storms." "No, you shake for different reason." His voice was gentle. "You cry." Alara hadn't realized tears were sliding down her face until he said it. She wiped them away angrily. "It's nothing." "Not nothing." He shifted in the cramped space so he could see her face. Lightning illuminated his features, all sharp angles and concern. "You can tell me. I understand running. I understand pain." Maybe it was the storm. Maybe it was 3 weeks of carrying the weight alone. Maybe it was the way he looked at her, like her pain mattered. Whatever the reason, the words came pouring out. They all acted like I should be grateful, like marrying Cyrus was an honor. My father told me I was selfish for wanting more than a rich husband and a big house. Her voice cracked. But I watched that man break his first wife's spirit piece by piece. I would have died in that marriage. Maybe not my body, but everything that makes me who I am would have died. Dakota listened without interrupting, his dark eyes never leaving her face. "I don't regret running," Alara continued, "but I'm tired of being alone with it. Tired of people acting like wanting to choose your own life is somehow wrong." Thunder shook the earth again. In its aftermath, Dakota spoke, his voice rough with emotion he usually kept buried. "My wife, Mapia, she died protecting our daughter. Cavalry come at dawn. I was hunting deer 3 miles away. Heard the shots, but too late." He paused, jaw working. "I find them after. Mapia cover our daughter with her body. Both gone. I carry them to sacred ground and bury them. Then I stop being person, just empty thing that breathe." Ilara's heart shattered for him. She reached out and took his hand. He stared at their joined fingers, like he'd forgotten what touch felt like. "You make me feel alive again," he whispered. "First time in 2 years I want to wake up. Want to see next sunrise. You do that just by being here." Lightning flashed. In that brief moment of light, their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. Then Dakota reached up and touched her face with calloused gentleness, and Alara leaned into his palm, like coming home. Everything changed after the storm. Dakota no longer kept his distance. He'd find reasons to sit beside her at meals, to walk with her during evening rounds, to teach her new skills she didn't really need to learn. The whole camp noticed. Nadua watched them with knowing eyes, but said nothing. One morning, Dakota brought her a dress made of soft deerskin, decorated with intricate beadwork. "Nadua make this. Say you need proper clothes if you stay." "If I stay?" Alara took the dress, running her fingers over the careful stitching. "You stay, yes?" For the first time since she'd met him, Dakota looked uncertain. "Or you still want to leave?" Alara thought about the ranch she'd fled, the father who'd sold her future, the empty life waiting back in civilization. Then she looked at Dakota, at this man who'd brought her back to life just by seeing her as human. "I want to stay." The smile that broke across his face was worth everything she'd left behind. That evening, Nadua pulled Alara aside. "Dakota asked the elders permission to make you his wife. Our way, not white, way. You understand what this means?" Alara's heart hammered. "What did they say?" "They say yes. But you must choose too. No one force you here, not like your people do." The ceremony happened 3 days later under a full moon. It wasn't like any wedding Alara had imagined as a girl. No church, no preacher, no fancy dress or guests judging every detail. Just Dakota standing before her in the firelight, speaking words in Comanche that Nadua translated. Words about partnership and respect, about choosing each other every day, about walking the same path until the earth claimed them both. When it was done, Dakota took her hand and spoke in English for everyone to hear. Your name now, Peta Ainika, Golden Fire Woman. You burn bright. You burn free. The camp celebrated with food and music, drums beating rhythms that made Alara's blood sing. She danced with Dakota under the stars, his arms around her waist, and felt more married than any paper could ever make her. This was real. This was chosen. But joy has a way of blinding people to danger. The next morning, one of the scouts came racing back to camp, his horse lathered with sweat. He spoke urgently to the elders, gesturing toward the eastern ridge. Alara didn't need to speak Comanche to understand the fear in his voice. Dakota's face went hard as stone. He turned to Alara, and she saw it in his eyes before he said the words. Cavalry scouts seen near the canyon, and they looking for someone. He touched her cheek. They looking for you? They weren't cavalry. They were worse. 3 bounty hunters rode into the canyon at dawn, rifles ready, greed written across their faces. Cyrus Dalton had put a price on Alara's head. $500 for his runaway bride, dead or alive. The camp was already awake, warriors positioned on the high ground. But the bounty hunters didn't care about strategy or respect. They'd tracked Alara across half of Texas, and they wanted their money. We know you got her, the leader shouted, a scarred man with tobacco-stained teeth. White girl, red hair, probably scared out of her mind. Hand her over, and nobody gets hurt. Dakota stepped forward alone, unarmed, but somehow more dangerous than all 3 men combined. Alara tried to follow, but Nadua held her back with iron fingers. You leave now, Dakota said, his English clearer than it had ever been. This not your land. She not your woman. The scarred man laughed. That savage teaching you English, girl. How sweet. But you're coming with us either way. Mr. Dalton's willing to pay extra if we bring you back unspoiled, but he'll settle for a body, if that's how you want to play it. She stay here. Dakota's voice dropped to something lethal. You go, or you die. 1 Indian against 3 guns? The scarred man raised his rifle. I like those odds. What happened next took less than 30 seconds, but Alara would remember it for the rest of her life. Dakota moved like lightning given human form. He was on the first man, before the rifle even fired, snapping the weapon away and driving his knife between the man's ribs in one fluid motion. The second hunter got a shot off that grazed Dakota's shoulder, but then Dakota had him too, breaking his neck with his bare hands. The scarred leader backed toward his horse, fumbling to reload. Dakota stalked toward him like death itself, blood streaming down his arm, his face absolute fury. The man fired wild, missed, tried to run. Dakota caught him at the canyon entrance and beat him unconscious with brutal efficiency. But he didn't kill him. Instead, he hauled the man back, threw him on his horse, and spoke words that made even the unconscious man seem to flinch. You tell Dalton. You tell cavalry. You tell everyone. She is mine. She stay. Anyone come for her, they die like your friends. He slapped the horse and it bolted, carrying its battered rider back toward civilization. Dakota turned to face the camp, chest heaving, covered in blood. His eyes found Alara's. She'd never seen anyone fight like that, never seen anyone willing to kill for her. And the terrifying part was, she wasn't scared. She was grateful. But they both knew the truth. The wounded man would talk, and soon, everyone would come. The elders called a council that night, 23 people sitting in a circle, deciding the fate of them all. Ilara sat beside Dakota, his shoulder freshly bandaged, his hand gripping hers like an anchor. The oldest warrior spoke first in Comanche. Nadua translated quietly. He says we knew this day would come. The free life is ending. The white men won't stop until we're all dead or on reservations. This girl, she just made it come faster. Guilt twisted in Ilara's stomach. She'd brought this on them. These people who'd given her shelter and acceptance were now targets because of her. Another elder argued back, gesturing at Dakota. Nadua continued translating. She says Dakota was dead inside until Golden Firewoman came. She says some things are worth fighting for, even if we lose. The debate raged for hours. Some wanted to surrender Ilara and hope for mercy. Others wanted to fight. A few suggested scattering, each family going separate ways to make harder targets. But everyone knew the truth. Their time was running out. Finally, Dakota stood. The circle went silent. "I will not give her up," he said in Comanche, then repeated in English for Ilara. "She is my wife, my heart. I already lose one family to white men's hate. I will not lose another." He looked around the circle. "But I will not ask you to die for my choice. Peta Inika and I, we leave. We go north. You stay. Make peace if you can. Live if you can." "North?" an elder scoffed. "That's a death sentence. Winter is coming. You'll freeze before you reach safe territory." "Maybe," Dakota agreed. "But we die free, not in chains." Nadua stood next, her weathered face fierce. "I know a place, far north, near the mountains. Mixed families live there. Trappers who married native women. Others the world rejected. It's not easy, but it's possible." She looked at Dakota. "I go with you. My son and his wife too. We find this place or die trying." 2 other families volunteered. 7 people total, willing to risk everything for the slim chance of freedom. The rest would stay, try to negotiate with the coming soldiers, hope their surrender would buy them decent treatment on the reservation. That night, Ilara lay in Dakota's arms in their shared shelter. "You should let me go," she whispered. "Turn me over. Save your people." Dakota pulled her closer. "You are my people now, and I choose you. Every time, I choose you. Even if it kills us. Even then." He kissed her forehead. "Better to die together and free than live apart and caged." They had 2 days to prepare. 2 days before cavalry and bounty hunters and Cyrus Dalton's rage descended on this canyon. 2 days before they ran toward a future that might not exist. They left before sunrise, 7 souls riding toward uncertain freedom. Dakota and Ilara led, followed by Nadua, her son Kame with his wife Tyan, and an older couple named Hanska and Patwin. They carried what little they could, weapons and dried food, and the desperate hope that Nadua's memory was right about the northern settlement. The first week was brutal. They pushed hard, covering ground fast, knowing cavalry would track them. Ilara's body screamed in protest, but she never complained. She'd learned to move quiet, to read the land, to survive on nothing. Dakota watched her with pride that made her chest ache. On the 8th day, they spotted riders behind them, 6 cavalry soldiers and 3 more bounty hunters. The chase was on. They rode through a river to break their trail, climbed rocky terrain where horses struggled, split up twice to confuse trackers, reuniting at predetermined points. Kame took an arrow through his thigh during one ambush. Tyen cauterized the wound with a heated knife, while he bit down on leather to keep from screaming. "We're not going to make it," Alara said one night as they huddled in a cave, exhausted and running low on supplies. "Yes, we will," Dakota insisted. "We have to." But doubt was creeping in. They'd been running for 3 weeks, and the northern territories still seemed impossibly far. Winter was closing in, turning rain to sleet. They were down to 1 meal a day. Hanska's cough had gotten worse. Then, on the 24th day, everything changed. They crested a ridge and saw it. A valley tucked between mountains, smoke rising from chimneys, buildings that looked permanent and lived in. The settlement Nadwa remembered. "Is it real?" Alara whispered, afraid to hope. Nadwa's eyes were wet. "It's real." They approached carefully, ready for rejection or violence. Instead, they found a community of misfits and survivors. A French trapper married to a Lakota woman, a freed slave who'd married a Shoshone healer, Mexican families and Scottish traders, and native people from a dozen different tribes, all living together in defiant peace. An older man with a gray beard approached them. "You running from something?" "Yes," Dakota said simply. "Everyone here is." The man studied their exhausted faces. "You willing to work? Contribute? Follow our rules?" "Yes." "Then welcome home." He smiled. "We don't ask about the past here. We only care about what you do now." They'd made it. Against impossible odds, through cavalry and bounty hunters and 3 weeks of hell, they'd found a place where Dakota and Alara could just be Dakota and Alara, where love mattered more than blood, where freedom was possible. That night, lying in a real bed for the first time in months, Alara cried. Not from sadness, but from relief so profound it hurt. Dakota held her close, his own eyes wet. "We're home," she whispered. "Yes," he agreed. "We're home." 2 years later, Alara stood outside the cabin she and Dakota had built with their own hands, watching their daughter chase butterflies through the meadow. Najoni was 18 months old, wild-haired and fearless, with her father's dark eyes and her mother's stubborn spirit. She spoke a mixture of English and Comanche, belonged to both worlds and neither, and didn't care about the difference. Dakota emerged from the cabin, moving quieter than he had any right to for a man his size. He wrapped his arms around Alara's waist and rested his chin on her shoulder. "What you thinking about?" "The woman I was supposed to become," Alara said softly. "The one who married Cyrus Dalton, who lived in a big house with servants in fancy dresses and absolutely nothing that mattered." "You miss it?" "Not even for a second." She turned in his arms to face him. That woman would have had everything except herself. She would have been comfortable and safe and completely hollow. Dakota brushed a strand of hair from her face. And now? Alara looked around at the life they'd carved from wilderness and determination. Their cabin was small but warm. Their community was strange but loyal. She'd learned to hunt, to track, to speak 2 languages fluently and bits of 3 others. Her hands were calloused from work. Her skin was weathered from sun and wind. She owned 3 dresses, and they were all practical. She'd been shot at, chased, nearly frozen, and completely transformed. "Now I'm the most fulfilled woman in the world," she said, meaning every word. Not the most comfortable, not the richest, not the safest, but the most fulfilled. "Because you choose this life," Dakota said, understanding as he always did. "Not forced, not sold. Choose." "Because I chose you." Alara pulled him down for a kiss. "And you chose me back." Najoni ran over, demanding to be lifted. Dakota scooped her up, making her squeal with laughter. Elara watched them together, this warrior who'd been dead inside until she stumbled into his world, and the daughter they'd made from two impossible lives colliding. She thought about her father sometimes, wondered if he still searched for her or if he'd given up, told people she was dead. She thought about Cyrus Dalton and hoped he'd found some other woman to torture. She thought about the scared 19-year-old who fled her wedding with no plan and no future. That girl had been terrified, but she'd been brave enough to run toward the unknown instead of accepting the cage. And that bravery had led her here, to a life she couldn't have imagined, but wouldn't trade for anything. "Mama, look!" Najoni pointed at an eagle soaring overhead. Elara looked up at the bird, free and wild against the endless sky, and smiled. "Yes," she thought, "that's exactly how I feel. If this story moved you, click that like button and subscribe to the channel. Tomorrow, we have another incredible journey of courage and love waiting for you. Until then, keep choosing your own path."